This week we begin our consideration of the nature of ultimate reality. If God exists, what is God, and how does God relate to the phenomenal universe? If there is no God, then how best can we understand the ultimate nature of reality? Our first step in this inquiry will be a look at the debate around the analogy or univocity of being. We will go from there to consider the relationship between God and the world, considering pantheism, panentheism, and classical theism. This is also the place where we will consider the question of transcendence and immanence. We will conclude by looking at the Chinese concepts of Tian, Tao, and Tai Chi, and the Buddhist concept of dependent origination. Our first question may seem rather abstract, but it is actually quite straightforward and has profound implications for the way in which we use and understand religious language. When we speak univocally, we use language in a way that applies in the same sense to all objects. When we speak analogically, we use language in a way which implies that while two or more things may be similar, they are also different in fundamental ways. Thus, the word human is applied univocally to everyone in this class, male or female, old or young, teacher or student. We are all fully human. If, on the other hand, someone were to warn you against taking my class by saying, "That man Suedo is a real bear," they would not be claiming that I am a furry, snouted mammal of the order Carnivoridae and the family Ursidae. They would rather be saying that I am large, loud, have a bad temper, or something in this order. This is an analogical use of language. Historically, most metaphysics in the tradition which descends from Hellenic philosophy, the philosophy of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, has argued that our use of terms such as being, good, true, beautiful, and one is analogical, not univocal in nature. These transcendentals, as they are called, are properties of things insofar as they participate in being. They thus apply fully and completely only to God, who is the power of being as such. Truth is being as an object of judgment. Only God is really true. The good is being considered as an object of desire. Only God is truly good. Beauty is being considered as an object of perception. Only God is truly beautiful. The one is being considered in itself. Only God is truly one. From this point of view, God does not exist in the same sense that we do. God is not a being, but rather the one unique being in which everything else participates. This has profound implications for the way we understand and live in the world. On the one hand, there is a fundamental breach between our own existence, which is contingent and dependent on God, and God considered in herself, who exists necessarily. This is a distance we cannot cross. The idea of becoming God in nature is simply ridiculous. On the other hand, our existence is itself a participation in the life of God, and aspiring to be godlike simply means building on what we are to begin with. The moral imperative is to grow towards divinity through intellectual and moral excellence. At some point in the Middle Ages, exactly when is disputed, but certainly by the time of John Duns Scotus around 1300, people began to think about God differently, focusing less on God as the power of being in which everything shares, and more as a kind of divine sovereign on the model of the absolute monarchies which were then beginning to emerge in Europe. Similar developments took place in the Islamic world. The result was the development of a univocal metaphysics which thinks of God as existing in the same way we do, so that the difference between God and us is quantitative rather than qualitative. God is a being just like everything else. The difference is that God is infinite and we are finite. This view also has profound implications for the way in which we understand and live in the world. Being is suddenly a zero-sum game. Trying to be like God becomes an assault on the dignity and sovereignty of God, an act of disobedience deserving eternal damnation. This in turn led to an increased focus on original sin, something which is characteristic both of late medieval Catholic theology and of the theology which emerged from the Protestant Reformation. It also led to the development of the Calvinist doctrine of double predestination, according to which God predestines everyone to salvation or damnation before the foundation of the world. The moral imperative is absolute submission and obedience, doing God's will in the world without even thinking of becoming like the divine. As the scientific revolution led some to question whether or not we really need the idea of God in order to explain the universe, This univocal metaphysics took on a paradoxically very different meaning. If there is no God, a univocal metaphysics opens up the possibility of building an infinitely powerful being, that is, of building God, or perhaps more modestly, of gradually transcending the limits of finitude by means of scientific, technological, and economic progress. This is the technocratic secular ideal which is dominant in our own society and which exists uneasily side by side with more traditional ideals of participation in the divine and with liberal democratic and socialist humanisms which see humanity itself as the basis for our idea of God. It is also a univocal metaphysics which drives contemporary fundamentalisms, which insist on the literal truth of religious claims. In this sense, fundamentalism shares the same metaphysics as technocratic secularism. For both, there is only one world, this world. If a religious claim is true, then it has to be literally true, and it points to real historical events, past, present, or future. If it is not literally true, then it is not really meaningful to begin with. From the vantage point of older traditions rooted in an analogical metaphysics, on the other hand, most Judaism, Catholicism, Islam, and Hinduism, nothing is really true except God. Religious claims are a human attempt to capture meanings which far transcend the capacities of language and other types of symbolic communication. Where do you stand? As you think about the ways in which you use religious language, are you using it analogically or univocally? Do you uphold an analogical or univocal metaphysics? And how is this reflected in the choices you make about how to live your life? I look forward to our discussion.